Congressman Darrell Issa has been keeping his eye on the Joe Sestak situation, and as we continue to watch, it looks like it's not just Joe Sestak of Pennsylvania who was offered a job to step aside from the Senate race there. You've now got Colorado embroiled in this, while Rod Blagojevich is being prosecuted for what appears to be the same exact thing. The White House is stonewalling, Sestak now backtracking, and the media seems to be looking the other way, or at least looking at Sarah Palin's breast. Congressman, good to have you back with us.
Well, good to be on. And as you said, everyone does it. Only some get prosecuted. In this case, former Governor Blagojevich, rightfully so, is being prosecuted for trying to sell a seat and quite frankly, eliminating fair merit. But, of course, President, I should say Rahm Emanuel, on behalf of the president, has been doing that since the day they were sworn in.
Well, and one of the interesting things about this whole Sestak case is we've got a White House memo, one of the few things that have come to light in terms of documentation, and I know you're pushing for a full and fair investigation, but the White House counsel's office acknowledges that there were conversations, plural, that these conversations stretched over 2 months. So this supposed conversation, this kind of brief passing fancy with Bill Clinton on behalf of the administration, clearly is not the only conversation that was had about a job to get Sestak out of that race.
Oh, no question at all that there's less than full truthfulness and disclosure coming out of that combined camp. It's one of the reasons that I finally, out of frustration, knowing that the Attorney General, the White House themselves, we were not going to get a fair investigation through anything that the White House had control over. And so we tried one last time to go to the special counsel who normally investigates what's called Hatch Act violations. But the truth is that when government money is spent by government officials to do political things, you violate the Hatch Act. So we finally said, okay, this is not the primary place you would historically go to enforce the president and his administration doing firsthand what's right. But we have no choice left because except for the court of public opinion, we have absolutely no power to get the administration to stop breaking the law.
And that's really part of the problem, isn't it, Congressman, that the court of public opinion, according to some polls I've seen, I think the newest one from Rasmussen, indicates that most people think this is just business as usual. Now, they're disgusted by it. They're not happy with it. But they think that this kind of, we'll give you a job if you'll do this, business happens all the time.
Well, certainly in Chicago it happens. It's the Mayor Daley way of doing it. And there's been plenty of other patronage over the years. Certainly if you look at people in any administration who end up with ambassadorships and how much money they raised for the president when he or she ran, I think it's pretty obvious that there's a link. The difference here is that the link is overt. If you do this, I will give you this job. And in the case of Romanoff, they actually laid out the 3 paid jobs that would be considered if he would get out of the race, which he hasn't done, and rightfully so shouldn't. In the case of Sestak, not only did they offer some jobs and have conversations, but now they're backpedaling on it, but they would have denied the voters of Pennsylvania the candidate that turned out they preferred, at least the Democrats preferred. And that's part of the reason that on behalf of the job that I'm required to do, that I'm honored to do, I've got to sort of enforce what even the American people are not yet focused on. We're focused on the disaster in the Gulf and the unemployment, but someday we'll be focused on the end of democracy if we allow this to be taken to the absurd, which is clearly being done in this administration. Since we broke the story, back in February, March, I get calls, whistleblower calls, reports that we're following up on, and we're finding additional credible examples of this administration using various tools of the presidency to distort democracy.
Well, and we've seen it, both in terms of how they force through their legislation as well as how they try to force their will in the political process by denying investigations when you've got, Black Panther thugs wielding clubs at a voting place, and they don't see anything wrong with that. They don't see anything wrong with these illegal, illicit bribes being offered to get people out of political races. I mean, and their Justice Department maybe should be retermed the Injustice Department because they are not pursuing the interest of justice. They're pursuing political interest.
There's no question. This is a very politicized justice in this administration. It's not going to do anything except ignore this. And, I was proud in the last administration that even something like dismissing 8 or 9 U.S. attorneys who were served at the pleasure of the president was investigated. Ultimately, there wasn't much there, because they had every right to dismiss them for whatever political reasons each of them were being dismissed, including a couple simply so that more people could be rewarded. But at least in the last go-round, the administration recognized they had to answer to Congress repeatedly about what they did and why they did it, because it was the American people's right to know that U.S. attorneys were not being dismissed in a way that would affect criminal prosecution. And, I'm not saying that the administration was cleared. I think to a certain extent the administration did a terrible job. But now we have one in which we have emails, government expense, government jobs, and they're pretending like business as usual is okay. It's not okay, even in the last administration, and this is the administration that said it wasn't going to be business as usual, and now it's business as usual on steroids.
Well, and again, when you're prosecuting Rod Blagojevich for essentially the same thing, giving a job for a benefit, and that's what they were trying to do here. They were giving a job or offering a job to get a political benefit. In Blagojevich's case, there's no evidence that he was actually getting handed any cash. Some of what he was apparently negotiating at one point was just to get better treatment, to kind of be an insider and maybe get the political advantages. Looks to me like it's almost exactly the same thing.
Well, in the case of Blagojevich, I think the trial will determine a lot of these facts. There's every reason for a governor to select somebody to appoint to Senate that they believe they, in fact, will have the ear of. There's no question. That's fair. Otherwise, Democrats wouldn't appoint Democrats and vice versa. In this case, though, when you move legislation based on spending the taxpayers' money, when you clear field so that there's more Democratic money to spend in other races so you can have a greater majority, and you use taxpayers' money, who's going to be the advocate for protecting the taxpayers' money and rights? And that's really all we're saying is that there's no question that every one of these moves by the administration, the taxpayer was going to pay for the Democratic Party feeling like they got something better. And by the way, in the case of Pennsylvania, very clearly that people were going to be denied the Democratic preferred candidate. And, it wasn't a small preference. Sestak clearly was a better Democrat than Arlen Specter. Heck, he might have been a better Republican than Arlen Specter. but think about the distortion. I happen to be a Republican, so I have no particular vested interest in the Democratic primary. But the Democrats in Pennsylvania certainly should have wanted every possible great candidate. In South Carolina, maybe they weren't looking for the great candidate because they couldn't beat Jim DeMint. But, Pennsylvania's a swing state. Who they select will, in fact, determine whether they get a Democratic senator of their choice. There's no question that the administration was out of bounds when they tried to protect somebody for cronyism reasons that they didn't even believe in or like. They were simply protecting them as part of the deal. That's government at its worst, especially when it's your tax dollars.
Well, and the sad thing for Sestak is he was only offered, according to his story, one unpaid position that he wouldn't even have been eligible for. You get Romanoff out in Colorado, he was offered 3 pretty good positions. I mean, Sestak wasn't even getting offered anything decent to get him out of the race. Maybe they didn't really want him out all that bad. And if they wanted to get somebody out, they just had Bill Halter cost them about $10 million in union money fighting Blanche Lincoln with no success. I mean, if their intention was not to divert resources to races that they needed to use in other places, they kind of missed the boat in Arkansas, didn't they?
Absolutely. And remember, there are 2 defenses that the American people should not accept. One is that others did it. The second one is that because we're so inept that it doesn't work, we deserve not to be prosecuted. Just because you fail in corrupting and attempts to corrupt government doesn't mean that the trying of it, if everyone that tried to rob a bank, if they didn't succeed, didn't get prosecuted, we'd have a lot of bank robbers, who never went to jail because we stopped them.